Today's guest on the Keelan Yoga podcast is Jock Orton. Jock, I've heard of for many years now, and finally we've got to talk today. He's running, and he started the Limehouse Yoga, which is a studio, and it's got some accommodation attached as well. So it's kind of a retreat centre, really, right, Jock?
We used to have another building that we used. We had like 7 bedrooms, but at the moment we've kind of scaled it back since COVID, actually, and then we've kind of put some pods in, so they're like self-contained, self-catering pods. It's a lot easier doing self-catering than trying to cater for 14 yogis with various
special diets.
Yeah, exactly. You know what it's like. You were a chef.
No, it looks wonderful. It looks a wonderful space. I mean, it's in Cornwall in the south of England. If you're not aware of the geography of England, that's right in the southwesterly tip of the UK, near between Perranporth and Newquay, if you know it more distinctly. And a wonderful part of the world, and it's just an amazing project. So you've got to look up in the first place, Jock's studio / semi-retreat centre in Limehouse Yoga, and it's just an amazing kind of sculpted place. It looks like in the middle, like a kind of, I'm sure people have described it before, like a kind of Teletubbies kind of sculpted into the cliff. You probably heard that loads of times, right?
Well, yeah, we get all sorts of descriptions of it. Somebody described it as having a Klingon cloaking device because it's mirror polished. It's like a stainless steel mirror polished building that obviously just reflects its surroundings. So we've got beautiful landscape around us. So depending on the day, depending on the weather, it just changes all the time. As you walk around the building, it kind of just morphs into the landscape.
That's amazing. Right. So it's kind of disguised like a kind of James Bond secret layer in a sense. Right. Well, before we go and talk about that, I'd rather first get to know you a little bit better. I've heard things, and particularly, I suppose, let's start from the start. And then the normal place I imagine you would take this is from how you got into yoga and your accident in the first place with a snowboard.
Yeah, in 2000 I was living in a camper van up in the Alps, and having a great time, and wasn't kind of really sure where I was going. Just enjoying life. As you do. I was about 26, and then one day I'd gone down to into the valley and kind of just picked up some supplies, and I had a rucksack on. And as I was traversing back around the mountain, I kind of got to the top of the kicker park, which is like the the big ramps, etc. And I thought, I'll just need to go over the first one. I wasn't doing anything too flash, and went over, did a little spin, and then landed, which I've done hundreds of times before. But I didn't account for the rucksack on my back, and just kind of it kept rotating and that kind of extra weight, and I just messed up the landing. And I had quite a serious accident. Ended up breaking my back in about 5 places, smashing up my shoulder, because my legs went laterally over my head. So it just meant that I was at the time I knew I'd instantly broken my collarbone. It was quite a bit of a mess. But I didn't know about my back. I remember hearing something click, but I didn't have any pain. It was just like, I remember sort of getting up from the floor. Obviously I wasn't paralyzed, but I remember getting up and just having this kind of laser focus. It's like, right, collarbone's broken. That was pretty obvious. It's like, I need to get down the mountain. So I snowboarded down the rest of the mountain. I knew where the medical center was. And I kind of got down the mountain, walked into the medical center, and just said, I've broken my collarbone. And they kind of looked at me and they said, we'll be the judge of that. And I kind of pulled my shirt back, and they went, yes, you have. It's like, yeah. So they kind of x-rayed me, and that was a complete mess. They were like, well, okay, it's not an awful lot we can do here. It's like the side of the mountain. It's just a small medical center. And with that, the pain kind of started in my back, and it just, that was when kind of the adrenaline kind of was subsiding. The pain started kicking in, and then I pretty much couldn't move. And then they were a little bit concerned. They thought I might have ruptured something inside. So I ended up having to do like the longest walk ever, because nobody could kind of touch me. I think in hindsight they should have stretchered me out, but I just didn't want to be touched, and I was in absolute agony. So I had to walk just like inch by inch, about 400 meters to get to an ambulance. Eventually they got me in the ambulance, took me down the mountain. x-rayed me, and then the radiologist kind of came out and he said, oh, don't worry about it. You've broken your back. It's all stable, but don't worry about it. You've done it before. So, and I was like, pardon? What do you mean I've done it before? And he said, well, you've broken your back before. He goes, I can see on the x-ray. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I don't think I have. But he goes, no, you definitely have. I can see on T9. It's got, striations. It looks like it's grey. It's wearing it's stripy. It's definitely been broken. So I was like, oh, okay. I remember having, growing up, and there was a period of time where my back would go into spasms, and this is all leading up to how I got into yoga. But yeah, I ended up having to spend a week in hospital. They kind of put lots of metal work in my shoulder, trying to put that back together. So, they said, well, your back's kind of stable. The other break is obviously healed at some point. We'll just, let you get on with your life. So I came back to the UK, a little while later, and I spoke to some of the surgeons over here because the shoulder wasn't healing very well. It started to get infected. And I asked them about the T9, the previous break, and they kind of had to do some MRIs and kind of scans on my back. And he said, well, yeah, he goes, it looks like you have broken it at some point, but, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. He said, if we stress tested your back, it would probably be the first part that's going to break. And I was like, well, I don't intend on doing that, so I think I'll be all right. So, I spent about kind of 2 years doing sort of rehab, because my shoulder was just not in a good way, because there was so much stenosis in my shoulder. It was pushing down to the main, the brachial plexus. My arm started getting thoracic outlet syndrome. So, it was just a bit of a mess, really. So I was living in London at the time, so I came back and lived in London. And then my friend's mum actually came around one day, and she was like totally enthused, and she was like, man, I've just come back from this yoga class. It's amazing. You've got to go. And, the person who does it says if you do it for 30 days, it'll cure anything. And by this point, I'm thinking, fantastic. I'll do this. This would be great. So I went along, and I look back now, and I am just so in awe of the teacher that let me come into his class, because bearing in mind, I hadn't long come out of hospital. I think it's probably about the second operation I'd had, trying to kind of clear up, because the shoulder was just in a mess. And I walked in, and it was a Bikram class. It's in North London. It's a Bikram class. And I walked in, obviously I took my shirt off, because, as you know, Bikram, you just wear a pair of shorts or Speedos, whatever. I was just wearing my board shorts. And he looked at me and he said, are you okay? And I had an elastoplast that was, because I had like 25 stitches across my shoulder, huge elastoplast covering up this fresh surgery. And I said, yeah, I'll be fine. He was like, and fair play to him. He let me go in the class. If somebody did the same nowadays, I'd be like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I went into this class, absolutely loved it. That was my introduction to yoga. I ended up going to a Bikram class, North London. I remember halfway through the class, I was so hot and sweaty. The elastoplast just slid down my chest. I had to go down, towel down, put another one on. But that was my introduction to yoga after having this kind of horrendous accident. Yeah. And then I did that for a little while, living in London. Then I ended up, I'm talking a lot. But,
that's all right. I'm listening. Yeah. And then you got into Anusara yoga, is that right? From the Bikram. Yeah.
Yeah. I went from Bikram. I did a bit of Iyengar, actually, and had some lovely Iyengar teachers. And then I met Bridget Woods-Kramer. So I moved back down to Cornwall, and just by chance, I ended up moving back down to Cornwall at the same time that Bridget did. And she was living in London. She had a couple of young children. I don't know whether you know, but she was actually, she knew Jonathan, who set up Try Yoga. So she was actually the person that said to Jonathan, because Jonathan originally, I believe, was going to set up some gyms. And Bridget had been training over at Yoga Works in America, and she was, I think she was the owner of some, like the Covent Garden Spa or something. She was she was working in those circles in London, and she was the one that said to Jonathan, said, no, I think you need to set up a yoga studio, because yoga is going to be the next big thing. So she was, instrumental in helping Jonathan write the business plan for Try Yoga. And then I think right at the last minute, she suddenly realized that if she stayed in London, she would be kind of stuck, with Jonathan not running the studio, and thought, do I want to bring my children up in London? And she said, no, actually, I want to bring them up somewhere a little bit more rural. She moved down to Truro and then set up a yoga studio in the middle of Truro. It's an old chapel. And I just happened to find out about it. And then I went along and I met Bridget. And from the very first class, I was totally hooked. I was just like, wow, this lady, she knows something. So that was my introduction into Anisara. And then from that, I stayed with her. I remember doing my first teacher training with her. It was the first one that she had run in Cornwall, with no intention of ever teaching. I didn't want to be a yoga teacher, So, and I did that. And then I did a follow-up, like the level 2. Again, still no intention of being a yoga teacher. I just loved the practice. I knew what it was doing for me. It was just this kind of amazing experience. I was getting better, I was healing.
I was going to say, did it heal your shoulder and your? I mean, I think it said on a very scanty. If you're really looking for Jock, it's bloody hard to find him, by the way. But on one podcast I managed to listen to research you a little bit, you said you'd broken the collarbone into many pieces, right? So it sounded like a really difficult thing to recover from. So I wondered how that had generally gone with up to this point in the yoga.
I had a lot of metalwork in my shoulder because they tried to, because I had a lot of pieces. It hadn't broken through the skin when I broke. I don't want to be too graphic, but it was almost at that point. And when they kind of had to open me up, they kind of just, from the x-rays I saw, it just looked like they kind of collected as many pieces of the bone as possible, wrapped it in a piece of metal, bolted it all through. And then, so, on the previous or subsequent x-rays, I've still got a piece of bone and it's still there to this day. And it's like a shard of bone that goes down into my chest, So, and then because they couldn't test whether the bone had actually healed because I could tell there was a problem. It kept getting infected. And it got to the point where the bolts all came loose. So it was pretty hideous. I mean, I'd just be sitting, I might just be chatting to a friend one day and suddenly I'd just move a tiny bit and it'd be like somebody was literally shooting me and I'd just been shot in the shoulder because I'd just click, it'd just be like this incredible pain. And it was just the movement of the bone still inside. And 2 years went by. So this was 2002. And they decided, I think this is in the fourth operation, they decided they were going to take the metalwork out. And they took the metalwork out. I came round, spoke to the surgeon. He said, oh, it's a non-union. I said, it's still broken. He went, yes. I was like, oh, okay. Well, this is not what I wanted to hear. He said, no, it's not really great. He said, it's still broken. He said, there's so much stenosis, so much bone growth in that area. That's why you're getting the thoracic outlet syndrome, because it's just trying to heal itself. And the two ends of the bones, they're trying to match and they're just creating this kind of pressure in your shoulder. So they're like, we're going to have to do another operation. So I was like, oh, okay. I went to see another orthopedic surgeon. And then they said, oh, well, we can remove your first rib if you want. I was just like, why? Why would you want to remove my first rib? And he said, well, that will kind of create space. So, any of the movement of the bones won't push down. It won't compress the nerve. It's like, sounds a little bit barbaric, if you ask me. And I said, just out of morbid curiosity, when can I have this done? And he said, oh, next week. I was like, wow, how come I'm jumping the queue? And he said, well, oh, we've got another surgeon from London who, because I was in Cornwall at this time. He said, we've got another surgeon from London who would like to see the surgery being done. I was like, no. And I said, well, and also, just out of morbid curiosity, what about the scaling muscles that attach to my first rib? And he said, oh, we'll just cut those off. And then they'll just wither, and the rest of the muscles will kind of grow, they'll develop, and they'll take up the slack from the other muscles, which are now no longer supporting your head. And by this point, I was just like, no, this is so barbaric. This is silly. and he was just like, look, I'm just telling you, it's been 2 years. Your bones, they will not heal. He said, we have to do something. And I was like, by this point, I was just fed up. And I was like, I don't want to do anything. I just want to rest. I was doing, practicing by this point. And I said, I just want to take some time out, And then I started upping my yoga practice. Started doing more chiropractic care, homeopathy. And then on the anniversary on the 3rd year, they x-rayed it. And they're like, oh, it's healed. The 2 bones have joined. So it's like, fantastic. This is like, I think what my body needed was actually just for the interference of having, this kind of foreign body, just get it out of the way. It was just the infection was actually stopping it from healing. So once we removed the metalwork, the infection cleared up, the bones were able to do what they were doing and needed to do, and they joined. So now, it's a little bit lumpy up here, and I can still feel all the bolt holes through the collarbone, but it's still fine. I can still practice properly.
Yeah, I mean, you must feel a bit of restriction in the shoulder, surely. But
no,
really,
no. I've got,
wow.
I've got fairly mobile shoulders. I remember seeing one of the physiotherapists there, and she kind of came in with her sheet of a little exercise I had to do, and she kind of gave me this thing. She just said, "No, can you do this? Can you do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can do all of this." I said, "Absolutely fine." And she said, "Well, you're fine then." I said, "Yeah, but I've got fairly mobile shoulders. I can literally wrap my arm around the back of my head and touch my other ear, Yeah, and she was like, "Well, there's nothing I can do because on my sheet, this is all I've been prescribed to give you." I was like, "That's fine. I'll carry on doing my practice." So I can still, I've got a fairly decent practice. I can do quite a few of the advanced postures, but I don't seem to have any problems with it,
My God.
So I've just been very fortunate. So
Yeah, and how long did that take you from? So you say 27 when you did that fatal kick jump with
I
the
was 26 when I broke it.
Right.
The time I got healed, so it's like 29 by this point.
Right, so just a time span. Wow, I can't
Yeah.
imagine how many times you thought, "God, if only I hadn't done that jump."
No, you
You
know what?
didn't think
I've
like that.
never.
You never
At
thought like that.
at the time,
Right?
we can get into that. There's,
Yeah.
I look back now, and I wouldn't change a single thing. If I had the option of somebody, sitting beside me at the top, because I still remember sitting down. I remember getting to the top of the kicker park. I remember sat down. It's a beautiful sunny day. Just looking out over this beautiful mountain, and I thought I'll just do the first kicker. And if somebody could have, if I sat down and said, "Don't do it," because it's going to change the course of your life, I would still do that jump because I'm so grateful for breaking my back and breaking my shoulder and everything else because I found yoga, and it sounds I'm not being too trite about it, but everything, I've got this beautiful studio, I've got an amazing community, everything that is, I think, I'm really, really grateful for has come out of that one accident.
You must have had some dark days when you were there without the
Yeah,
healing bone
absolutely.
and the
Yeah,
infection, and
absolutely.
you didn't have the yoga, thinking, "I wish I hadn't done the jump." Sure.
Absolutely.
I
I
mean,
remember.
latterly, of course, you were lucky, and
Yeah,
made an incredible trajectory, and you have your own. You very much your own tangent and way through the yoga, having had that deepening experience with your own body and with your own,
yeah.
with your own the
I,
mortality, I suppose, right?
I definitely had some dark days. When I remember, because I was living in a camper van at the time, bearing in mind my camper van, it wasn't insulated. It went down to -15 at night. I remember lying there going, "What on earth have I done? This is really serious. I am in a bad way here." And I didn't. I never told my parents. Until the day my mother passed away, I never told her.
Huh.
I stayed living in France, and because I ended up just thinking, right, I'm just going to stay here, wait till I'm healed a little bit, wait till the spring, then I can drive back. And I told my brother. He phoned up. I just told him I broke my collarbone. That was it. And that's all they needed to know. Why would they need to know anything else? So, yeah, my brother phoned up. He said, "Oh, I've got everything planned. I'm going to get him." My brother lives in Italy, so it wasn't that far for him to travel. He said, "I'll come over and I'll help you and we'll move the van." I said, "No, you can't come over. You've got to stay there." He said, "Don't worry about it. I'm absolutely fine." So I just stayed in France for a few months, waited till the thaw, the spring, and then I drove back to the UK, which was a monumental drive.
Mm, mm.
So,
I'm sure it
but
was in that condition. It's hard enough anyway. I've done that a few times. Yeah, yeah, and
yeah,
and also, I mean, just to, to get a better picture of you, you mentioned that you were an illustrator. So was you doing that at the time? Was this?
yeah. I trained originally as an artist, as an
Mm,
illustrator, as a natural history illustrator, actually.
yeah.
So, which is something I'm really passionate about, I absolutely love. And that's why, I live in Cornwall, I'm Cornish. I'm just surrounded by nature. So that was one of the things that, just kind of puts you into, it's almost like a meditation. I mean, a lot of the stuff I was doing, just being in nature, drawing and doing life drawing and, just I absolutely adore it. But one of the things I also love is photography as well. So, a lot of the time when I was doing my illustration, I was either in the life drawing room or the dark room. I just, as long as you're with an illustration, as long as you produce an image that can be printed, you're left with pretty much free reign. So yeah, it's just something that I've always done. I've always loved art, and that's kind of just the way I remember doing it as a kid, and just always done it.
Mm, mm. And then, how did you get into Ashtanga then to kind of bring us on to this roughly present chapter? When was it,
Well,
and who was it
the
that got you into it?
Ashtanga was
Yeah.
through. I kind of dabbled a couple of times. I remember because I was with Bridget in Truro, and I knew of this other Ashtangi who was living in Penzance, and down there, and you knew John Scott, and I remember getting his DVD and just being absolutely, it's like, oh my God, this is something incredible. And I thought, shall I go down and see this guy, John Scott, because he's not that far from me. And I was just really loyal to Bridget. And I thought, do I want to have another influence on my practice? Because I love Bridget to bits and I love the whole Anusara way of teaching. And I didn't. And I kind of regretted it when I found out he moved back to New Zealand. And I was like, darn, I've missed my chance to go and see him. So it was a few years later, because obviously he went to New Zealand, and then he set up his retreat centre, and then I found out he came back. And a mutual friend of ours, Amy, who I know she had gone out to New Zealand and practiced with him, and said, John and Lucy, amazing. They've got a beautiful place, just great hosts, brilliant teachers. And she came back raving about John and Lucy. And then when John moved back to Cornwall, I was like, that's it. I've got to go see this guy now. So I don't know what year that was. I don't know. I'm going to say 2012. I might be wrong on that. Don't know.
Yeah, around that time. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, ish. So by this point, I've been kind of practicing. I started, I've been practicing about a dozen years. I was already a teacher, but I was teaching, and by this point, I had my own studio as well. I'd set up Limehouse because Bridget's studio had closed, so I'd been just kind of hiring halls here, there, and everywhere, and just being that typical traveling yogi, with my car boot full of yoga mats and the blocks, and you know what it's like. So, and then I went down to see John and had just an amazing week with him and Lucy, and just that was my introduction, because I went in and John said, just welcome me. I said, look, just be open with you. I don't know the Ashtanga system. And what he heard was, I'm a beginner. So he was like, oh, okay, right. When he put me together with this other guy who, I think he was German. He was a really nice guy. And his mum had been due to come over and she couldn't come. So she sent her son instead. So there's me and this German guy, and he, had hardly done any yoga. And we were kind of just fumbling our way through, the standing and, the primary series. And after about a couple of days, John was like, so what do you do? And I said, well, I've got a chiropractic patient education company, because by this point, and jumping back a few years,
Mm.
I'd set up through all the practice and kind of breaking my back and everything else and doing the chiropractic care. I'd actually married a chiropractor. And that's how I got into creating this chiropractic patient education company. So, if you walked into a chiropractor's office, any information about, whether it be back pain, sciatica, fibromyalgia, I was the person that, sold that information to chiropractors so they could give it to their patients. So, and I said to John, I've got a chiropractic patient education company. And then somebody else asked him another question, so I didn't get to finish. And also, I'm a yoga teacher. So, on about the third or fourth day, and he overheard another conversation I was having with somebody else. And I was talking about my studio. And John just kind of looked at me and he said, what studio? What are you on about? And he goes, I thought you had a chiropractic patient education company. I said, yeah, I do. And I'm a yoga teacher and I have my own studio in just outside of Perranporth. And he's like, oh, okay, you're a dark horse, aren't you? So, and that was kind of the beginning of our friendship, because, we kind of, he started used to come up and practice with me, come to my house, because my original studio, the Limehouse Yoga, was just built on the side of my house. I was like hiring halls here, there and everywhere. And then in about 2010, I'd renovated my house. And on the side of the house, there was a smallish room, like sort of 7x5. And I created the yoga studio there. So I didn't have enough people to kind of warrant just, becoming a full-time yoga teacher. So I was doing this kind of traveling yogi here, there and everywhere, hiring village halls, had my chiropractic patient education company. And then I started up a couple of classes just in this room on the side of my house. And then eventually John came up to the studio, and he came up on the solstice. Actually, it was a solstice kind of party, because with the community we have here, we've got an amazing community. Every solstice, summer and winter, we throw a little barbecue party just to say thank you for people turning up. And it's just a lovely way to get people just to come together. And then you get a lot of people that might come on like a Tuesday night, another group on a Thursday, and they come together at the solstice and they realise that they knew each other, and they're like, oh, I didn't know you knew Jock and Limehouse and everything else. So, and John turned up to one of our parties and walked around, came to the back garden, and was like, who are all these people? There was like 70 people in my back garden. And I said, they're all students. And he was like, oh, okay. There's quite a nice like yoga community down here. So, and then we just became firm friends. He actually was so generous with his time, and he used to come up, he'd come up on his motorbike, and he'd practice in the morning, and that was pretty intense. We would practice literally alongside each other in the studio. The heating turned on full, and we would adjust each other all the way through the practice. So he was the one that kind of showed me the practice. And I think, he's quite open about it. He goes, I just wanted somebody else to practice with. So
he was always like that, very open with his time like that. I used to do the same thing with him in Cornwall a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it was lovely. We actually had a fantastic time. There was, we just used to laugh a lot, It's just a really fond, time. And eventually he had, him and Lucy split up. He'd had a flat. He used to share with his daughter, India. And India, she had a boyfriend, and, he's like, eventually he kind of moved into my spare room in my house. So, because he was like, oh, I just felt like a gooseberry, there's like two young couple, they're in love, and I'm there, and, so eventually, because he'd be traveling here, there, and everywhere. So, he'd come back to Cornwall, and then he'd just, live in the spare room. So it would save him traveling from Penzance to my place. We did a lot of practicing and a lot of laughing.
What an amazing opportunity
Yeah.
to have that. And to learn from John in that way. Wow. I mean, it also sounds like a better introduction than that you got. I mean, I remember turning up, and it must have been 2000 and when was it? Like 2003 when you first moved to Newlyn, I think. Right? And I came in, and he said, "Oh, you look nicer than you look in your picture," because you had to send You know, John, he has an ability to unfilter, like to just to say whatever comes to his head. And it was a training, his first ever training, right? And you had to send a little photograph of yourself, you know, and some words or something. And he had everyone's everyone's resumes there, you know. And he looked at mine and says, "Oh yeah, you looked a bit harsh in the picture. You look a lot nicer in real life," or something like that. And I always, and that was you know, a good 25 years ago, so it's stuck in my head. Yeah.
Still having therapy about it.
Oh yeah, exactly. Thanks, John. Yeah. No, you know, what do they call it? Resting bitch face or something. You know,
Yeah.
yeah. Still got it now. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. What a beautiful experience. Incredible, and to be. I mean, you know, John obviously is one of very few for the Ashtanga community. So wow, and let's move on now to a little bit about this business situation in Cornwall and creating a community. And I hear you got European funding and the place itself, as I said to everyone, just have a look at the images of the place. It's beautiful. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how it went and the design? Because I think you had some problems with the backers on the design. And then we can move on a little
Yeah,
bit. About that.
it's definitely an interesting story. It was a lot of sleepless nights. We had we had an incredible amount of support from our community. I mean, unbelievable. Because we had this small room on the side of our house, you know, like 7 by 5, and we kind of outgrew it. So we thought, well, we need to create a nice space, a little bit bigger studio. And we're very fortunate. We've got 7 acres of land here in a beautiful valley that goes down to the sea. And we thought, right, we'll try and get planning and put it down, you know, be sympathetic planning, you know, in one of the fields, out of the way, nobody would be able to see it. And then we spent a lot of money, you know, getting the drawings done, the plans done, going through, getting all the local councillors to support it. And eventually the Cornwall Council said, no, absolutely no way. We're like, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting. By this point, we'd spent a lot of money. And essentially, when you submit a plan like that, you've got a choice. You can either, if they say they're going to not support it and turn it down, you can either just retract it and you lose your money, or you can try and fight it. And then in the process of them of fighting it, they then have to do a massive report as to why they're not going to allow it. But if they write that report, when you do a subsequent application, they've then got a draft of why they shouldn't approve it again. They've got essentially the black and white. They're like, oh, okay. So we thought, well, we'll just withdraw it and we will start again. And we've had a set of stables on the land. And when we kind of thought, right, we'll put it there. There's already an existing building there. So we're not building something new on the landscape. So we put in their plans and eventually went through all the due diligence, the processes. And you have to kind of submit loads of documents. And eventually they turned around and they said, no, we're not going to accept this one. And we're like, this is utterly ridiculous. You know, why aren't they going to do it? And they said, well, and also we're thinking of going to shut you down because you're running, we think, an illegal business from your house. I'm like, oh, okay. So you have to have a certificate of lawfulness. And when we set up the business, because it's on the side of our house, we kind of submitted, you know, we had a criteria to get the certificate of lawfulness. So we followed everything. We matched all the criteria. We'd been running a business there for long enough. And then we had to pay like £300. And then they said, we're going to shut you down because you don't actually meet the criteria for the certificate of lawfulness. I'm like, that's ridiculous. So we went back to them and said, we do actually meet it. And they said, oh, we've re-looked at our criteria and we realized you don't match it. And it's like, well, we've just followed everything that you've told us to do and we're going to fight this. So we wrote to all of our students, and bearing in mind we'd had, John had taught teacher trainings in the old studio, Manju had been here, Kathy Cooper. We'd had loads of really well loved and respected teachers teach from the studio, and we'd had we had such an amazing community, and we knew how much we meant to people. And so we wrote a newsletter and sent it out to all of our people, our students, and said, look, this is the situation. The council are going to think about closing us down, but we need letters of support. And everyone wrote letters of support. We had over 160 letters of support. We had so many letters of support, we actually crashed the portal on the planning website, and it was unbelievable. And people, it still makes me slightly emotional now. It's just like people were writing their life stories, And I remember one student, she wrote everything that this studio meant to her, and she was like, they won't publish it on the website. And we're like, why not? And they said, we can't publish this; it's too personal. So she was like, no, I've written this. This is how much it means to me. So I want you to publish it. So they refused, and then eventually they were still going to say, no, we're not going to accept it. Bearing in mind, we had no letters of objection. So we had over 160 letters of support, no letters of objection. But for some reason, I do not know why, they were still not going to accept it. So we kind of phoned around a few people, spoke to a few people, and then we, through a friend of a friend of a friend,
bribed them.
No, we did not bribe them. We just got to speak to the head of planning, the head of Cornwall planning, and he found out what was going on. And he was like, he got in contact with us and goes, I have no idea why this is not going ahead. He said the criteria that they've stipulated as to why they are not going to support it. He said, I can think of a dozen reasons why we would support it. So he goes, I'm going to override my officers, and we are going to get this put through. So thankfully, it was the head of the planning, like the head honcho. He was the one that actually came up, stepped up to the mark and said, we're going to support it. And then from that, we had, as you said, the European funding. They gave us a tranche of money, and I could talk about this for hours because there was a whole load of, I'm giving you the very, very abbreviated story, but it was our community that helped us get this. And obviously the European funding was helpful. I've made a couple of good investments, and I had a property that I was able to sell. I don't have a pension. I just kind of sold everything I had, and sold a property that I had, and was able to make a bit of money on that. And I've literally invested everything into building this space, this community space. So yeah, it was definitely a journey. And the thing was that we got the funding, we got the planning, obviously, and then we put a spade in the ground. Late 2019, and as you know, what happened in 2020.
Yeah, I was going to say you've had some. I would say your own trajectory has definitely been coloured by very bad luck and very good luck, it seems. But nothing in between really.
Well, yeah. But honestly, I am so grateful. As I said, I'm just so grateful. We've got this amazing, beautiful space.
Thriving now.
I've worked really hard.
Really
hard to make it as beautiful as I can. And I still get just such a sense of satisfaction when, sometimes I'm practicing in the studio and people kind of meander through the gardens. The gardens are beautiful. And they will come through the gardens. They don't know I can see them. And I just watch them walk up the steps to the studio. They turn around and they're just presented with this most amazing view of these beautiful gardens and the landscape around us and this valley. And I just see their shoulders just go, just relax. And it's just like, that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. This kind of preempts my question, really. What's the high? There's a high point of it so far. I mean, you talk about creating community, and it definitely seems like a real community hub. Which is, my experience of Cornwall anyway is that if one doesn't know England, let's say, Cornwall is definitely on a little ledge sticking out. And it has that propensity for kind of tightly meshed kind of connections and communities down there. So yeah, like, do you want to talk a little bit more about the community and maybe the high points, and what are the challenges? What have been the challenges so far in running a yoga business? Have you been disappointed or disillusioned? I mean, it's easy in this, when you do spend so much time in yoga to to have your highs and also to have your lows with the modern yoga world as well.
Yeah, I remember talking to a mutual friend of ours, Scott Johnson, and before we actually built this studio, and he'd come down, we'd taught retreats together in the old studio, and I just told him about the plans and about building what we built here, and he kind of looked at me and went, "So let me get this right. You're going to invest quite a lot of money. I'm not going to tell you how much, but it was a lot, and you're going to build an international yoga studio in the middle of a field in Cornwall." And I thought, oh, yeah, I am. So, and it was just like, because the community here is just so supportive. They are absolutely amazing. And we had all the stories when people were writing about what it meant to us. And it's just like, yeah, we have loads. We have times when it's like financially, it's been really tight, and I think back to how, that moment when we kind of closed in March 2020, and I was just like, holy shit, what have we done? I've literally invested everything, and I'm kind of not even halfway through the build. Are we ever going to get to the point where we actually do in-person classes again? We closed a week before we officially should have done. So I think was it March 17th or something? So we, could see the writing on the wall. March the 10th, we literally emailed everyone, closed the studio. Bear in mind, this place was essentially a building site, still in the old site. And I remember one of my students, it was like last class we ever taught in that studio. And suddenly she looked up and she went, "This could be the last class we ever do in the studio."
So thanks very much.
Suddenly just
thanks for that. Yeah,
it's just like, wow, this is pretty crazy. So and it was, she was right. She was absolutely right. That was Helen. And it's just like, oh, okay. So that financially, it's just, you don't, as you don't do yoga to become rich.
That happens to a few, but not many. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, it's like not even the 1%, is it?
Yeah.
So it's, financially it's hard. We try and make it affordable. And one of the lovely things that we did in COVID, which I'm still so proud of the community, was we said, look, we're going to do everything on a tiered system. So price wise, we're going to give people the option. I said, this is what we know is an average price. And I said, but if you can afford to pay more, then there's another price. But if you can't afford, then there's this lower price. And we looked at it. By the time we got back in the studio, we looked back over the figures. It was absolutely bang on. I mean, there were people that paid the upper price that never actually came to an online class. They just said, give it to somebody else who can afford it. And I was like, wow, amazing. So, now, and I look back at, that whole period of just that kind of uncertainty, unknowing. So there were so many sleepless nights. I mean, unbelievable amount of sleepless nights. My beard went grey over that period. But, and I remember the irony was when we opened up with social distancing, we had the exact number of students that we would have had at max capacity in the old studio. We used to have, you've been doing yoga long enough that your mats would be like that far apart from one another. And in the old studio, that's what it's like. We used to have a maximum of 18 people and everyone got to, know each other very well. And when we opened up, we have, the studio itself now will take easily 45 people with loads of room to spare. And then when we opened up social distancing, we had 18 people. It's like, okay, hopefully this social distancing
Space to
won't go
roll
on
their
for two.
arms around them. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
you
was a
look back
funny
in it.
time when everyone was kind of having
Oh,
been used to being packed in, and you could kind
yeah,
of go up to someone and it's like feet around their mat.
yeah.
Kind of,
And I look back on it now, and it's just like, how conditioned did we become? It's just like, no,
but
this is
also,
going to be.
people changed back again quite quickly as well. I was kind of surprised actually at how quickly people changed back to
No, is it?
to the norm, as in a sense.
I
Yeah.
remember having a couple of classes where and there was still a little bit of reticence about coming back into the room. I've got to say there are some students that used to be absolute, regular, come 2 or 3 times a week, and I've never seen them again since.
Yeah, it's been
Not
just
everyone came back.
patterns. I think not that they didn't not doing something. I think it's just that one has patterns, and I noticed this. And once you even have a couple of weeks of breaking a pattern, and then you just do something new, or they tell
Yeah,
you, oh, I'm just now doing spin classes instead because I kind of did a bit of that when you were away, and
yeah.
that's really great. Anyway, so yeah.
I don't know whether you ever had the experience of people would come into the studio, and this would be, after we opened up, and it might it was even up to like a year later of us being fully open, and they'd walk in and go, yeah, I've been practicing for like about 3 years now, but this is my first in-person class.
That
I'm
was a
like,
strange phenomenon. Yeah, yeah,
wow,
yeah.
okay,
I've
this
been
is
doing it
going to be,
online. I've been learnt it online. I started it
yeah,
online, and I was doing these classes with so and so for a couple of years, but I've never been to a real class. Yeah, that
yeah,
was a weird thing,
probably
and
doing
it
it with
still
you,
happens now. Even, yeah, maybe
yeah.
it still happens. You nick my students. It's still no, it still happens now. Honestly, people are still coming to me now saying I learnt it during COVID, and I'm still practicing. I've not been to a class yet. Yeah,
Wow,
even now, yeah, which
yeah.
is crazy, isn't it? And it's weird. I mean, I didn't want to do it at all. I didn't want to go online. I didn't think it would work, which is kind of ironic because I'm kind of like Mr. Online now with all these different things on it. But it was never my plan. I remember Teresa telling me, you got to go online for the students. They need something. And I said, it doesn't work. That doesn't work to teach Ashtanga online because it's about it's about the physical assists. Well, see, I kind of 180% change around there really in terms of my view on physical assistance and adjustments now. But I really felt then couldn't be done, could not be done. But actually, it works well. I mean, complement the studios. It kind of gives people
Yeah,
a bit of autonomy over their practice. Sometimes where the studio, you could feel like, well, you're in a group of people being told what to do, or kind of looking at everyone else. And in the home, it's like it or not, you're with yourself a bit more.
yeah.
Yeah.
There are lots of, going back to your original question on the highs and lows.
Mm-hmm.
One of the real positives that came out of COVID was actually the online class because in the studio, I started out, and I'm looking at you now on the iMac, I can see you, but if I had 25 people, each of the squares are like tiny, and you're like really straining your eyes trying to see them. So, once we built the studio, I was just like, okay, the online thing is going to be a thing now. We're going to have to kind of incorporate that. So we spent probably about, I think in total about £20,000 just on creating the online environment. We've put in two 80-inch screens in the studio, and if somebody said to me before I was going to build the studio, it's like, oh, you're going to have TV screens in the room, I'd be like, absolutely no way.
Mm.
That is just not going to happen in the studio. And then so obviously, you have to adapt. So we've got these absolutely ginormous screens.
Oh
We've
wow!
got,
And you're still using them
this,
now. People are
yeah,
coming and doing mixed. So it's a mixed format. Even in my sort of classes, people are
yep,
online and people in the wow. That's
yeah,
amazing. You
yeah.
carried on. I mean, I don't see many mixed formats. I have to say, and I was asked to do one, but I couldn't. I just couldn't get into it. Yeah,
It's kind of a
yeah,
different skill set,
yeah. I
but
mean, in
but
the room or on the computer. I kind of find it.
yeah.
Generally not really a multitask in the first place. Yeah.
But I kind of learned, I do like tech, I love all that gadgetry
Right.
and things.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I got to the point and I thought, right, I need to be able to see people really clearly. So I bought these enormous screens, they're
Wow. I
80
want to
inch,
see
they're
this.
cinema
Yeah.
screens, they're
Yeah. It's
massive.
incredible.
And this morning I was doing a class online and somebody, I think she was in Dubai. So she came online, and I was doing a ropes class. We've got a huge Iyengar rope pool in the back of the studio. It's like, I think it's 14 meters wide. It's like one of the biggest ones in the country. And she was in Dubai, and she came online with her Iyengar teacher in Dubai, and they had their rope pool. They were in their studio, and they were able to see me clearly. So with the cameras we've got, the point, tilt, and zoom, so I can zoom in, move them around. They can track me around the room.
Wow, that's insane.
It was an absolute game changer for us. We have now got, because I can have, like Saturday morning, we get regularly, it's a lead Ashtanga class. When I say Ashtanga, it's I go off piste a lot. We can talk about that as well. But well, we have maybe between 30 and 45 people in the room. And I might have another 5-10 people online, but the screens are so big that I can see everyone as long as they've got their camera set up properly. I can see them really clearly. So wherever I'm in the room, because we've got the screens can mirror each other at either end of the studio. So wherever I'm looking, I can just look up and see people online as clearly as I can see people in the room. And I can
And then
give
you've got
them
a mic on, can you? So you can immediately speak to them as if they're there.
exactly.
Oh, I kind of like
and I
that.
incorporate
Actually.
them into the room as well.
Yeah, right. Wow, that is really interesting. Maybe it's possible after all. But we haven't got all that time, all the time in the world. Let's talk a little bit about your perspective on Ashtanga then, because you've been doing it a long time now, and I think from what I see on from the little squiz I've seen on what you do, I like it. I mean, it seems fairly in kind of in line with the pragmatic and, let's say, non-sectarian way that I teach. So, yeah, do you want to say a little bit more about the way that you envisage the
Well,
Ashtanga world, having never grown? I mean, have you been to Mysore? Did you ever get the tail end of anything like that? No,
I've
right?
never been to Mysore. I met Manju.
Right. Okay.
Because through John, I met Manju. Manju's taught at the studio here. And because Manju, he wasn't part of that Mysore scene, obviously, that the kind of split in the world. There's kind of the older generation from John's generation, people like, that kind of, they weren't part of Mysore. But after Patabi Joyce, finished, died, there was the people who stayed with Sharat. And it was just like, well, okay, I've got no desire to go to Mysore. So I let my Ashtanga from just a slightly older generation. I've done some workshops with people like Richard Freeman and various other people, and some of the older people, David Williams, and David Swenson's taught here. So they're just of a different ilk. And I don't want to teach it I'm not dogmatic. When I speak to John about the way that he got taught it, because it was in the small room, and I've looked at the original glyphs, the sheets that people see that John did originally, and I've spoken to John at length about this. In fact, I was looking at some of the weekend. I was printing out some of the second series, the intermediate series, and it says in all the poses 8 breaths.
Oh yeah. There's all these kind of changes. Oh, yeah.
So I remember talking to John, and obviously his original glyphs had, after the prasaritas, you go up into a handstand, press handstand, you come down into, Hanumanasana, and then you do Samakhanasana, and then back up again. And that's the way John and I used to practice it. And I said to John one day, I said, well, what's the deal? Because obviously you got asked to take it out. I said, but how come it was put there in the first place? And he said, well, because when he went to Mysore, he said the people that could do it were being taught it. He said that, referred to the Americans. I presume it's like Chuck Miller, Tim Miller, and, Richard Freeman. They were being taught that. So, and I'm like, okay, so it's a little bit more.
I think there was leeway, there was personal interpretation,
Exactly.
There were individuals being allowed to do certain things that was tolerated. There were some people given certain things for them. It was a freer and more, because there wasn't a prescription that it had to be a certain way. I mean, Batabi Juice used to say, like, people used to say, what, this and this, why is this changed? He said, yes, now doing. And they say, well, has it changed? He says, no, never changing, never changing, always doing same as I was taught, So there is that kind of, contradiction in it, right? But it didn't
Yeah.
really translate so well when, it comes to the more perhaps sort of linear Western mindset. So, well, what is the exact sequence? Let's nail that down and make sure that everyone does it in that way and say it's never changed. The whole thing has never changed because it's this divine prescription. Somehow you get it all right, something happens to you. But so there is a lot around that, and I suppose John is probably a great person to kind of diplomatize that. Really, always being traditional, but somewhat, definitely his own thing as well. Let's say,
My view of Ashtanga is like, I say to the students, like, you need to learn the rules. You do need to learn the rules, and obviously through John, there's a lot of counting. I said, because if you don't know the rules or understand what you're doing, you're not doing it by rote. If you're just doing it and going, well, I've got to do this next posture because that's the next posture in the sequence. It's like, no, I actually understand. Have a think about why you're doing that next posture. That's how I teach it. It's just like, okay, so reach Asana D, that is not going to be accessible for the majority of people ever. You're going to bust your knee at some point, or, you're just going to hurt yourself. So it's just like, well, let's think about something else we can do. And Manju is like, I spoke to him about it, and he said, no, do Bharadvajrasana. Bharadvajrasana is an intermediate pose. It's just like, well, that makes way more sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't teach it dogmatically. Ty Landrum was here last year, who I absolutely adore. And we had some lovely chats, and he's got his Black Lotus thing, and it's all kind of derivatives from Ashtanga,
which is Chandra Remete of Shadow Yoga's original premise. Like, this stuff is killing people's knees. Let's modify this and do some sensible hip openers. Come back to the stuff later, and maybe hips will be open, knees won't be torn. I tore both my meniscus in the first couple of years of practice. By doing that stuff. I mean, also the fact that it's a lot linear. I think people assume that one posture leads to the next, or that's the common narrative. You need to do Marichasana D in order to do Navasana. Is the idea that they don't flow linearly, and I think this is another big problem with the pedagogy around Ashtanga. That there's this: I need to tell you, to stop here, because if you can't do that perfectly, they're not qualified to do the next one, which is just silliness.
Yeah,
you may be able to do
totally
Kapotasana where you can't do Marichasana D. Whatever. Yeah.
This is something I've been teaching for years. Now, I remember I come from a different background. Anusara is, the way I describe it is if Iyengar yoga and Ashtanga yoga kind of had a love child, it would have been Anusara. You've got the kind of the flow of Ashtanga, but you've got the alignment of Iyengar, and that's what I really appreciate from the Anusara system. And I got taught that, so I've had really strong foundations. When I got taught by Bridget, for years we never did what were deemed to be like the advanced postures. We did just so much of the foundational work that when I went to do some of the advanced postures, I didn't need to try. I just did them. It wasn't difficult, but
that is how it's meant to be. Yeah,
I don't know. I've got a fairly open body nowadays. I can do a lot of the stuff. I choose not to. I don't put my leg behind my head anymore. I'm probably predisposed to having what you just had. No, my genetics are probably going to predispose me to having a hip hop. I'm older now than my dad was by the time he had both of his replaced. My sister, she had both of hers replaced at 42.
Well, if it's any consolation, it's not that bad.
Exactly.
And now 8 weeks in, I don't notice it, to be honest. I mean, it's only in yoga, lotus and stuff like that. Restrictive, badly. But in daily life and doing other exercise formats, let's say, because I like to do all kinds of things, no problem at all. It's only yoga that is a real mirror, let's say, to the situation. But it's feeling pretty good, So,
I'm glad.
Undoubtedly, people say, oh, it's not intrusive. Oh, it doesn't, like you just go in now and it's only an hour. It's like, it actually is very intrusive and very violent and hurts a bloody lot in the first, week or two, a lot. But after that, I think so many people say, like, wow, my life has changed altogether through it. So, yeah, for anyone listening and for yourself, like, yeah, absolutely, already can say totally worth it. Yeah,
But,
not
no,
an easy thing,
it's
but
one of the things
nevertheless
that
worth it.
my friend Helen McCabe, she's had both of hers replaced now, but she was
Yeah,
born
so
with hip dysplasia, so
no, generally it factors in. The guy said, my surgeon, that is, said I had the same thing. It's just, I think basically it's to say your hip joint in the first place lends itself through being not very ball sockety, not being very sockety in technical language, being a bit flatter, right, lends itself to the propensity of wearing down your femur quicker. Now they call it dysplasia, but I think so many people in the actuality have it. Yeah. I think I only have it on one side. The other hip, absolutely fine. This hip was toast. It's been that way for I think a good 5 years before I finally elected to have
well,
it
it's
done.
probably why you could get your leg behind the back of your head fairly easily because it actually wasn't in the socket properly.
Exactly, it was so easy to do on that side when it until just all of a sudden it wasn't at all, and now the other
Yeah.
side works and that side doesn't. The irony. But before I don't want to talk anymore about me, Jock. Let's talk a little bit more about you before we finish. What about the social media then? Let's maybe finish on that. And I mean, you mentioned it on your list of topics we could chat about, and I don't see you much on social media, and I think you're a little slightly shy on there, which is strange because in real life you're very chatty and obviously you have an eye for design. I mean, again, I'm going to mention the beauty of the place you've created. So we want to see more photos and more videos, and especially funny ones of you. Comedy videos, especially, will catch the eye for Instagram, I think.
Well,
So,
yeah, I've got Debs who works for me is amazing at social media. She is the voice of Limehouse, and she's always going, look, we need to get you in front of the camera a little
we
bit more.
do, yes.
I'm
The knee
like,
video was very good. Yeah,
so
yeah.
which one, sir?
The knee video when you drew the lines and fantastic, like a really good
Oh
idea.
yeah, that
Yeah. You
was
drew, like a kind of like the lines to show the angle of the knee with a piece of chalk or something like that. But really, really good idea. Yeah, very.
yeah, that was again Carolina from Purple Valley. She was going, look, we need to get you some because the thing is, I love chatting to people, but I just kind of have this kind of I don't know
Mental
salesperson.
block with it.
If I was to, because I kind of assume it, maybe wrongly, it's kind of advertising yourself and selling yourself. If I was to if you came up to me and said, look, I need you to do my social media, I could sell you till the cows come home, and that'd be fantastic. But doing it for myself is really difficult.
Yeah.
Just don't feel that way, and maybe I just need to get over myself. And I keep telling myself, yeah, I really need to do some more videos because Carolina was
Yeah,
really,
you do. I said
she
that
was
before as well. Oh, I
lovely.
could do it for someone else, but not myself. Just get over yourself. Yeah, get out there. You're good,
Thank
and
you.
I think people would appreciate seeing a bit more of you. And yeah, I mean it is a block. I know so many people say the same to me. Oh, how do you do it? And then like you worry like it'll seem like some. Oh, look at me, look at me. Sure, some people might see it like that, but you've got something that people might appreciate. Just look at it like that, perhaps. Yeah. And just like you brought the community around yourself originally, you can attract more people that resonate with what you're doing down there.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
appreciate it.
pep talk over. Anything else you'd like to mention before we finish? Anything that surprised you perhaps about the getting into the yoga business?
Surprises and yoga.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would. Because obviously I came in to heal myself, and
Mm,
if it was just purely that, I wouldn't have stuck around. To all intents and purposes, I've healed, but obviously as you get into it, there is just so much more. I just feel sometimes like I know so little. There's such a vast array of wealth of knowledge, and I'm quite a bibliophile. I have a huge yoga book collection.
would be worth coming
I
down to see.
adore yoga books. So no, I've
Ah,
a really good collection. So and sometimes I just read those. A lot of them kind of reference books. So I have a really good library, and I have a library in the studio so people can come in. They can sit down, grab a coffee. We've got a little coffee shop here, so people come to grab a book and sit down. And
wow.
yeah,
Nothing better as a pastime. Yeah,
yeah.
I got asked about my guilty pleasure recently. I didn't live up. It was in a in-person setting, and people say, "Oh, you used to ask people about their guilty pleasure in the podcast. What's yours?" And I said, "I'll go to a cafe and just do a bit of writing with a coffee, or read some yoga." And I was like, "That's not a guilty pleasure."
Yeah, that's just
But no, that
looking after yourself.
nothing sounds better than coming to your place and having a little look at your like a latter day BKS Iyengar library. I always wondered what his
Oh
studio
yeah,
library must look like, because he had that big library.
yeah.
And where are you going? And finally, where are you going with this? What are your next ideas, projects? What do you hope for in the future?
Well, my long term aim in the next sort of 3 years, I've got my eldest just gone off to university. They're at Edinburgh, just literally doing their first year now. My youngest is going to be 16 next month. So they're just going to be doing their GCSEs, A levels, and then they'll go to university. So for the next few years, obviously, I'm going to be working, paying off the bills of here. But my ultimate aim is to become the gardener. I think, I love being
Sounds like
out.
a good aim. Yeah,
I
yeah.
love being in nature, and
Yeah.
I just think certain things. And being in Cornwall is beautiful, and I love.
You've
I
got
am
the best gardens
Cornish.
down there. Tredogan, was that the garden that used to
Oh,
go there?
there's loads of amazing
And the
gardens.
Scilly, the
Oh,
gardens on
yeah,
Scilly.
absolutely
Yeah, some
beautiful.
amazing gardens down there. I have to say, yeah.
Yeah, so I just love
Tradition.
being out in nature and being in nature, and I've created these beautiful gardens. I've created this beautiful meditation circle, and my long-term aim is to kind of hand over the reins. I've created something here, long-term to actually take a step back. I'm slowly trying to kind of work out my exit strategy. So I'll still be
Already?
teaching. I don't plan on teaching full time all the time, but I don't plan on retiring. It's just not. I absolutely adore teaching. I love sharing this kind of passion I have for yoga because I know it's got so much good. The ability to heal, not just physically but mentally as well. And the stories I get and the kind of the thing that keeps me going is just having that connection with the community. One of the things I really respect in other teachers is kind of people that can hold a community. I guess I've been teaching now since I started in 2003. Bridget forced me into teaching. So over the last 20 odd years, I've got a couple of students that were with me on my very first class.
Wow, it's a mark of a good teacher. Yeah,
So yeah, I'm really proud of that. Actually, I've got some
yeah,
people that have been
absolutely.
with me
Yeah,
from the very beginning and supportive. So I don't intend on disappearing and kind of just going off and sitting in a cave somewhere, but I do intend on just kind of taking a step back, bringing up the next generation of teachers, creating this beautiful space and let them come in and run it and, carry on the community here.
yeah. No signs from your kids then that they might be interested in yoga.
No, obviously they don't know anything that
Slip it in
parents
there.
do. It's not good.
Oh, what about you?
Yeah,
What about
yeah.
having a yoga? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. No, it's one of the, you never want to push your children into anything because if you tell them to do something, they're just going to go absolutely no way. So, they may do when they're older. I don't know.
Right,
But,
and let me ask you today because as a final clincher, I haven't asked this question for ages, but I've not done a straight up interview of someone for a while, So I'm going to ask you the guilty pleasure inspiration question. Yeah, give me a guilty pleasure, a good one that's better than sitting with a book of yoga and a coffee in the library,
see,
and your inspiration, and it can't be the garden because we've said that, and deeply is an inspiration, but it has to be something else, something new.
guilty pleasure, right?
And don't say,
Art.
"Oh, I don't need to be guilty about it either," because we had
Well,
that
yeah,
as well.
that is kind of,
Yeah, yeah. That
I
was
am
just it's a figure of speech. A figure of
I'm
speech.
fairly open about everything. I don't think it should be guilt, but I
No, no,
really,
no.
really like a very good rum.
Ah, that's a
So,
good one. I haven't had that one for a while. Yeah. Someone
yeah,
did. I
so,
think someone mentioned. I think Dave Robson years ago mentioned beer. He likes a beer, I think, but I haven't had a spirit for a while. Whiskey. Someone mentioned a whiskey. No, so it's true. Someone has mentioned a whiskey, but I do like a bit of rum. Well, I suppose you're of that. Being Cornish, you're a pirate at heart, aren't you?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's the rum. Do they still drink rum down there? Do they?
Oh, probably. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's not just bulk standard. I mean, like talking about really good
a good
quality rum. 'Cause
quality one.
the thing is, when you only have a tiny bit,
Oh
and if I
yeah,
have a rum with my dad, it's that because it's like super expensive, but you only have a little bit. But it's that experience of sharing it, and going, my dad's 82. So just going, look, we're just going to have this little experience. We're going to have a little rum together and it's a really beautiful thing. It's really
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. I can imagine. And rum's actually quite a tasty, as spirits go.
Yeah.
It's quite a tasty and easy one to digest. You can have a few rums and they slip down quite nicely. What about the inspiration then? Something that keeps you going.
Inspiration.
Like when you feel a bit low and then you're finding it difficult, and what do you think about that kind of gives you a bit of a pep? Yeah.
Just it's got to be going out in nature and walking my dogs. No, I've got
Right.
3 dogs, and I've got to go out in all winds and weathers. Like, you've lived in Cornwall. You get that.
Yeah.
Well, West Penwith, it's pretty much raining all the time. But that mizzle. Yesterday, I went for a walk yesterday, and if it wasn't for my dogs, and I had to go out and take the dogs out for a walk. It's mizzling, and it's mizzle. If you're not from Cornwall, it's like a cross between mist and rain. So
Mist and
it
drizzle.
makes this
Yeah.
mizzle. It just kind of,
Yeah.
it gets everything wet. And
Yeah.
you wouldn't
Damn.
want to walk out in it. But you just, as Billy Connolly says, there's no such thing as like um, bad weather or poor weather. There's just a poor choice of clothing. So, and it's just like, if you
Scottish
get
thing to
dressed up
say.
properly,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so that'd be it.
Oh
Just going in
well.
nature and walking.
Yeah. That sounds about right. Oh right, Jock. Thanks very much. There's been a wonderful chat today. And please, guys, look up the Limehouse Yoga. You can find it on, I think it's limehouseyoga.com. We'll put the notes in the show notes to it as well, and see what they're doing down there. Because I know you do regular classes, but you also do host guests, international guests as well. So see what's coming up and make a visit, because it does look quite spectacular what you've created down there. So really, hats off to you, Jock. Thanks for coming on and keep up the good work, as it were.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.